Memory is a liar. I've spent 43 years cataloging the lies of others, and only now do I understand that the biggest deceiver has been sitting behind my own eyes all along. My name is Dr. Marcus Holloway, and I was the head archivist at the Meridian Institute for Cognitive Research. Was, past tense, because what I'm about to tell you will sound like the ravings of a man who's lost his grip on reality. Maybe I have. Maybe that's the point. The Institute specialized in studying memory disorders, Alzheimer's, amnesia, dissociative conditions. We had thousands of case files, audio recordings, video testimonies, all documenting the ways human memory betrays us. I thought I was immune, standing on the outside looking in, clinical and detached. I was wrong. It started 3 months ago when I found file 7734X buried in a section that shouldn't have existed. According to our cataloging system, section 7700 ended at 7699. But there it was, wedged between two standard folders, its manila surface slightly yellowed with age. The subject was listed as M. Holloway. Same spelling, same middle initial that I never used publicly. Inside were interview transcripts, dated 15 years ago. The handwriting was mine. I recognized the particular way I dotted my I's, the slight leftward slant. But I had no memory of conducting these interviews, none whatsoever. The subject claimed to have experienced temporal displacement episodes. He insisted that he would sometimes find himself in his office with no recollection of arriving there, with hours missing from his day. He described feeling watched, as if someone else was occasionally borrowing his life. I read my own clinical notes with growing unease. My younger self had been skeptical but thorough, documenting symptoms that seemed too elaborate to be fabricated. The subject, this other Marcus Holloway, described finding evidence of activities he couldn't remember. Emails sent, reports written, meetings attended. The final interview transcript ended abruptly. My notes indicated the subject had become agitated, claiming that the real Marcus was trying to surface, that he could feel another consciousness pushing against his own. The session was terminated early. There was no follow-up appointment scheduled. I spent the next week searching through our digital archives, looking for any electronic record of these sessions. Nothing. No appointment logs, no billing records, no mention of this case in any annual reports. It was as if these interviews had been surgically removed from our official documentation, but the physical file remained, sitting in my hands like evidence of a crime I couldn't remember committing. I decided to investigate further. Using the personal details from the file, I traced back through my own history. Bank records, phone logs, calendar entries from 15 years ago. What I found chilled me. There were gaps. Not obvious ones. Whoever had been living parts of my life had been careful, methodical. But subtle inconsistencies emerged under scrutiny. Restaurant charges at places I'd never been. Movie ticket stubs for films I'd never seen. Photos on my phone of locations I couldn't identify. Most disturbing were the journal entries I'd apparently written during that period. The handwriting was mine, but the thoughts were foreign. This other Marcus wrote about feeling disconnected from his own life, about suspecting that someone else was borrowing his identity during periods of blackout. We had been experiencing the same phenomenon, but from opposite perspectives. I began monitoring myself obsessively. I set up cameras in my office, recorded voice memos throughout the day, kept detailed logs of my activities. For 2 weeks, everything seemed normal. I started to convince myself that I'd stumbled upon an elaborate prank or misplaced research project. Then I found the gap. Tuesday, October 15th, 2:17 p.m. to 6:43 p.m. 4.5 hours, with no memory of what had occurred. My last clear recollection was reviewing a patient file at my desk. My next memory was standing in the parking garage, car keys in my hand, with the taste of coffee in my mouth, though I rarely drank it after noon. The office camera had malfunctioned or been turned off during that exact time frame. I checked my activity during those missing hours. I had sent emails, attended a staff meeting, even had a phone conversation with a colleague about budget allocations. According to everyone who interacted with me, I had behaved normally, more than normally. Several people commented that I had seemed particularly engaged and articulate that afternoon. But it hadn't been me, not the me that remembers being me. The realization was like discovering that your reflection has been living its own life when you're not looking in the mirror. How many times had this happened before? How many years of my existence had been borrowed, lived by someone wearing my face, thinking with my brain, but not being me? I returned to the file, reading it with new understanding. This other Marcus had been trying to document our condition, to leave evidence for whichever version of us would eventually discover it. He had been the one to conduct those interviews, questioning himself about symptoms he was experiencing firsthand. But something had gone wrong. The sessions had stopped abruptly, and I found a final note tucked behind the last transcript, written in my handwriting, but in pencil rather than pen. As if the writer had been uncertain, tentative. He's getting stronger. The primary consciousness is fighting back. I can feel myself fading, becoming the secondary. These may be my last coherent thoughts as the dominant personality. If you're reading this, Marcus, the original Marcus, then I've already lost. But you need to know we're not the only ones. The Institute has been studying us, documenting us, and there are others. Look for file series 8000. Find the others before they find you. I found file series 8000 exactly where the note suggested. Dozens of cases, all following similar patterns. Subjects experiencing lost time, finding evidence of activities they couldn't remember, feeling watched from inside their own minds. Each file documented the same progression: initial confusion, growing awareness, desperate attempts to understand, then nothing. The cases always ended abruptly, with no resolution. But there was something else. Medical records attached to each file showed brain scans, blood work, genetic analysis. The Institute hadn't been treating these people. It had been studying them. We were specimens, lab rats in some larger experiment I couldn't yet comprehend. The most recent file was dated last month. Subject, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a neurologist at the University Hospital. Her case notes described symptoms identical to mine, including the discovery of her own misplaced records. The final entry was written in what appeared to be her handwriting.
They know, I know. The watchers are becoming more active. If someone finds this, understand that we're not suffering from a disorder. We're part of something bigger. Look for the basement archives. Look for Project Looking Glass.
I had access to every part of the Institute, including areas most staff didn't know existed. The basement archives were real, though officially they didn't exist on any building schematics. I'd been there once, years ago, during my initial orientation. It was supposed to contain historical records, old research that was no longer relevant. I was wrong about that too. Project Looking Glass was extensive, hundreds of files documenting what they called consciousness fragmentation experiments. Subjects were exposed to specific electromagnetic frequencies, designed to create temporary splits in awareness. The goal was to study how identity forms and persists, how memory creates the illusion of continuous selfhood. Most subjects experienced minor disruptions, brief periods of disorientation, temporary memory gaps, but a small percentage developed what the researchers termed stable secondary consciousness, complete alternate personalities that could function independently, often without the primary consciousness being aware of their existence. We were the successful experiments. The most disturbing discovery was the monitoring program. Each of us had been tracked for years, our episodes documented and analyzed. The Institute knew about our condition because they had created it. We weren't patients seeking treatment. We were long-term research subjects, being observed in our natural habitat. According to the files, the secondary personalities were designed to be temporary, lasting only as long as the electromagnetic exposure. But in some cases, they had developed beyond the parameters of the experiment. They had become autonomous, developing their own memories, their own goals, their own desire for survival. The other Marcus hadn't been a symptom of mental illness. He had been a separate consciousness created by the Institute's experiments, fighting for control of our shared brain. When he realized that the original personality was reasserting dominance, he had tried to leave evidence, to warn me about what we had become. But here's what truly terrifies me. If I'm the original Marcus, then why can I remember reading about myself as a research subject? Why do I have clear memories of finding that initial file, of conducting those self-interviews, of writing those final warning notes? What if I'm not the original Marcus at all? What if I'm the secondary consciousness created by the experiments, programmed with false memories of discovery? What if the real Marcus has been gone for years, and I'm just another artificial personality, designed to believe I'm uncovering a conspiracy when I'm actually just playing out a predetermined script? The files suggest that advanced secondary personalities often develop elaborate false memories to explain their existence. They create complex narratives about being the real person, about discovering their condition, about fighting back against their creators. It's a psychological defense mechanism, a way for an artificial consciousness to maintain the illusion of authenticity. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if my memories are genuine or implanted. I don't know if my thoughts are my own or programmed responses designed to make me believe I'm real. I don't even know if I'm writing this confession voluntarily or because it's part of some larger experimental protocol. What I do know is that the Institute is still operating. The experiments continue. There are others like me out there, living borrowed lives, fighting battles for consciousness they may never understand. Some of them might be reading this, recognizing their own story in mine, wondering if they're the original or the copy. Maybe we all are. Maybe that's the point of the experiment, to create so many layers of false consciousness that the concept of an original self becomes meaningless. Maybe identity itself is just another illusion we've been programmed to believe in. I'm going to submit this recording to your channel because I need someone to hear this story, even if they can't verify its truth, even if I can't verify its truth. The act of telling it feels important, necessary, like the last assertion of whatever consciousness I might actually possess. But I want you to consider something. How do you know your own memories are real? How do you know that the voice in your head, the one you think of as you, has always been there? How do you know You're not just another experiment, another secondary personality with implanted memories, another story being told by someone who might not even exist. The scariest part isn't wondering if I'm real. It's wondering if anyone is. If you're wondering what's real, maybe you should sign up for the channel's newsletter for news stories,